they tell the story of 3 yeshiva students who were caught playing cards for money on Shabbos in the yeshiva. Oh my God, right? That's a bad one. And they were each brought into the head rabbi, and the rabbi says to the first one, he says, Shabbos? You're playing cards for money on Shabbos? And the poor fellow breaks down in tears and he says, Rebbe, you have to believe me. I forgot that it was Shabbos. I just plain forgot that it was Shabbos. He says, the rabbi says, you forgot that it was Shabbos? How can you forget that it was Shabbos? He says, I don't know. It just happened. I forgot that it was Shabbos. Please, please forgive me. So the rabbi said to him, you have to go into the study hall and read the entire book of Psalms, 150 Psalms, and give charity, and they'll be forgiven. The second student came in, and again he's contrite. He says, Rebbe, you have to forgive me. He says, playing cards on Shabbos for money? He says, Rebbe, you have to believe me. I forgot that you're not allowed to play cards on Shabbos for money. I forgot. I just forgot. He says, you forgot that you're not allowed to play cards on Shabbos for money? What kind of student are you? He says, I don't know. I can't explain it. I just forgot. You have to forgive me. So the Rebbe said, go to the base measure, say 150 Psalms, and give charity, and you'll be forgiven. The third student walked in, and the Rebbe says to him, what did you forget? What did you forget? And he says, I forgot to pull down the shades. Reb Levi Yitzchak Berdichev, known as the Ohev Yisrael, great Hasidic leader. You couldn't say anything bad about the Jewish people to him. He would always turn it into something positive, no matter what. I remember someone said to him, Isaiah himself says, Banim gidalti v'ramamti ve'im pashubi, I raised children and nurtured them, and they sinned against me. So you see, the prophet Isaiah speaks against the Jewish people. So why are you so obsessed with the goodness of the Jewish people? He says, you're reading the verse incorrectly. The verse is a question. I have raised children and nurtured them, and they've sinned against me? Is it possible? Of course not. So he interpreted that verse, which was clearly against the Jewish people, into a very positive verse. Reb Levi Yitzchak of Berdichev was walking around the streets of Berdichev, and he meets a young man in the streets of Berdichev smoking on Shabbos. He says, Yingaman, he says, young man, you probably forgot that today is Shabbos. And the young man says to the rabbi arrogantly, he says, Rabbi, I haven't forgotten that today is Shabbos. I know that today is Shabbos. The rabbi says to him, perhaps you've forgotten that you're not allowed to smoke on Shabbos. He says, look, Rabbi, I know it's Shabbos. I know you're not allowed to smoke on Shabbos, and I'm smoking anyway. So the rabbi says to him, perhaps you're sick and the doctor has prescribed that you have to smoke on Shabbos. So he says, look, Rabbi, I know it's Shabbos. I know you're not allowed to smoke on Shabbos. I'm not sick. No doctor has prescribed that I have to smoke on Shabbos. So cut it out. Reb Levi Yitzchak Berdichev looks up to heaven and he says, Ribono Shel Olam, Master of the world, look how wondrous are your people, Israel. They may defiantly smoke on Shabbos, but they won't utter a false word from their mouth. Look how truthful they are. So he found the justification in that the young man was truthful. At least he told the truth. Famous story in the Talmud about Rabbi Judah the Prince, Yehuda Nasi, who was the great leader in the year 100, 150. And he was the leader of Israel, very wealthy, aristocratic man. The Romans dominated the period of that period in Israel. And he was the president, and he was also the author of the Mishnayot. He wasn't the author, he was the editor of the Mishnayot. He compiled the oral code. He broke thousands of years of Jewish tradition and said, look, the Romans are oppressing us so harshly, we're going to forget the oral tradition, we better write it down. And for the first time, the oral tradition was written down in 6 orders of the Mishnayot. So he was a great scholar, great leader, wealthy man. He had a farm up in Sipori. If you go to Israel today, you can actually see the excavations in northern Galilee. Very beautiful. And he had a very strong friendship with the Romans, particularly with a man by the name of Antoninus. Antoninus. It sounds like Anthony or Mark Antony, but actually it's Marcus Aurelius. He was the last of the kind emperors. He was the last of the benevolent emperors. Again, around the year 150, 200. And whenever Antoninus used to come to Palestine, he used to visit with Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi. And on one occasion, he came up to Tzipori, to his palatial estate up there, and he came on a Shabbat day. And Rabbi Judah, the prince, had him serve the standard Shabbos fare. And Antoninus was smitten with the soup that he was served. And he begged Rabbi Judah to please give him the ingredients for the soup so he can go back to Rome and have the greatest royal chefs brew up that soup. He went back to Rome, got the best ingredients, got the best chefs, brewed up the soup, and it tasted flat. So he got better chefs, maybe he beheaded the first ones, better ingredients, tried it again, and it was flat. Antoninus was convinced that Rabbi Judah the prince was withholding an ingredient, a secret ingredient that he put in it because he wasn't Jewish. So on another occasion, when he went back to Palestine, he confronted Rabbi Judah the prince. He said, just because I'm not Jewish, what was the secret ingredient that you kept back from me? What was it? I know I couldn't get the best chefs and the best ingredients to replicate that taste. He says, what you tasted in my soup on that day was the taste of Shabbat, the Sabbath. And you can't replicate that taste unless you're in the spirit of Shabbat. As someone who eats leftovers the whole week from Shabbat, I know that it doesn't taste the same on Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday. But on Shabbat, there is a very special taste. And that's what we're going to talk about tonight. The specialness, the extraordinary specialness, and the extraordinary need in contemporary times for Shabbat. Because the world never needed Shabbat more than we need it today. Let's look at Exodus. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days shalt thou labor and do all thy work. What happens? What happens if you worked for 6 days, David, and you didn't finish your work? It says 6 days shalt thou labor and do all thy work. No.
And you wait till Monday.
You wait till Monday. No. What it should be is that once Shabbos comes, 6:17, 7:19, 8:15, whenever those candles are lit, it's in your eyes as if it's done. Everything is done. Everything is done. Okay? So 6 days thou shalt labor and do all thy work. Once the Shabbat comes in, it's as if everything's done. You have $1 million deal to consummate, it's done. It's done. You can't worry about it on Shabbat. So 6 days thou shalt labor and do all thy work. By the way, it says 6 days thou shalt labor and do all thy work. So it's a mitzvah to work. You see that? It's a mitzvah to work. Not sit at home and clip coupons and stuff like that, okay? You got to work, all right? I believe, and you've heard my interpretations if you went to my classes, that you have to do manual labor also. It's very important to be in touch with the ground, with the earth, to have a little garden, a little green thumb. But on the 7th day is the Sabbath unto the Lord your God. In it thou shalt not do any manner of work. Thou, nor your son, nor your daughter, nor your manservant, nor your maidservant, nor your cattle, nor the stranger that is within your gates. Stephen, what about your wife? She works like a slave, like a dog on Shabbos, right? So how come it's not here? She shall not do any work. These verses are addressed to men and women alike. Okay? Doesn't specify the woman here because she's being addressed. Okay? It's you, your son, your daughter, the woman as well. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth and sea and all that is in them, and rested on the 7th day. Wherefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. It may very well be We need physical rest just as God rested. God rested, so we have to imitate God. We have to be godlike. You got it? What did God say? Did God say Zachor, remember, or did God say Shamor, observe? Which one did he say? It says all the people gathered, 600,000 people, 2.5 million people at Sinai, and God spoke these words. So which one did he say? He said both of them? How could he say both of them? How could God say both of them at the same time? Because he's God. You can't, but God can, okay? God can say two things at the same time. Okay, wait. So according to tradition, in fact, Friday night on the prayer service, we say, Zachor v'shamor b'dibur echad. God said them simultaneously. Both of these versions, he said simultaneously. Why did he not say one and follow it with another? Or why didn't he incorporate the first version into the second version? You'll have to take my introduction to Bible class next fall for that, okay? Observe the Sabbath day and keep it holy as the Lord thy God commanded you. 6 days will thou labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath and the Lord your God in it. Thou wilt not do any manner of work, thou, nor thy son, nor thy daughter, nor thy manservant, nor thy maidservant, nor thine ox, nor thine ass, nor any of thy cattle, nor thy Lamborghini. Does it have in your version? No? Okay. Nor the stranger that is within your gates, that your manservant and maidservant may rest as well as you. Okay? Remember, a non-Jew is not allowed to do work on Shabbat for a Jew. That a Jew is not allowed to work, not allowed to do, okay? Same prohibitions, okay? So he can sweep the floor, clean the table, because you're allowed to do that, okay? Is he allowed to light a fire? No, not allowed to light a fire. How come you have the concept of the Shabbos guy, right? Governor Cuomo's father was a Shabbos guy. So many of the Fiorello LaGuardia was Jewish. His mother was Jewish, so he wasn't a Shabbos guy. Yeah, but what is a Shabbos guy? A Shabbos guy in Europe, because the weather was so cold and so bitter in the winter, was allowed to turn on an oven or put feed wood into the fire. Why? Because it was life and death. A person might be in danger of dying as a result. When it comes to life and death issues, a Gentile is allowed to do that work for you. But otherwise, a Gentile is not allowed to do it. And you will remember that you were a servant in the land of Egypt, and the Lord thy God brought thee out from there by a mighty hand and outstretched arm. Therefore, the Lord your God commanded you to keep the Sabbath day. So what's the reason for keeping the Sabbath according to Deuteronomy? What's the reason? Anybody awake? To remind us that we were slaves, and the Sabbath liberates us just as the Exodus liberated us, okay? So in Deuteronomy, in Exodus, the reason for keeping the Sabbath is because we need to rest just as God rested. In Deuteronomy, it's because you were slaves and I took you out. How can there be two different reasons? You'll see why there are two different reasons. True, but why do we have theories? Let's say the theory of evolution, the theory of gravity, the theory of quantum mechanics, okay? Why do we have these theories? The theories of magnetic poles and things like that. What is it? It comes to explain observable scientific facts, and we try to put them together to explain, why these things, why does an apple fall to the ground, okay? Why does that happen, okay? So we have the theory of gravity. But theory doesn't necessarily mean it's true. It seems to be true because all these observable facts fall into this category. Now, before I go into theory, and we're going to talk about theory, about Shabbos, let me just tell you a little bit about my experiences. I had the great privilege of studying with one of the great rabbis of this past generation, and that was Rabbi Joseph B. Soloveitchik. Rabbi Joseph B. Soloveitchik comes from a lineage that is a remarkable lineage of many geniuses, of many generations of geniuses. And his grandfather and great-grandfather really revolutionized the study of Talmud. It was considered the greatest honor to be in his class. Now, we were all senior students. This was post-college. Most of the students were post-college. Half the room was filled with senior students who refused to leave his class. Even after they graduated, even after they got ordained, they arranged their work schedules so that they would begin a lawyer, being a lawyer at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, or accountant, or whatever, and even doctors. They would stay in the class just to listen to him because what came out of his mouth was just unbelievable. He used to give class from about 11 in the morning till 1 in the afternoon. And the rest of the time, the students would prepare for this class, in the dread fear that he would call on you. And we would prepare the Talmud, and you didn't have to prepare that much of a Talmud, maybe part of a page, maybe a page. And the other side, you see, a page is actually two sides. There's side A, side B, right? That's the way it is. So this page one is two sides of a page. But the Talmud, has so many commentaries on the outside, on the sides of the page, that the text itself is very small. So you have to read the text, the commentaries, the super commentaries, all the references to Maimonides, etc., and you'd go crazy just memorizing, so if he would call on you. So you come to class, and remember, you'd get up, or you'd stay till 10, 11 o'clock at night studying, preparing, and you'd get up early in the morning, daven. By 9 o'clock, you were again in the Beit Midrash studying till 11 o'clock, and he'd walk in. And he would say, Bookwald or whoever, friend, read the Gemara. And the person would begin reading. And he would say, explain the first line. And basically, you would think it's a piece of cake just to explain it. And after about a line or two or three, Rabbi Soloveitchik would say, I'd like to ask the following question, Can anyone answer? And he would ask a question. And they would struggle over it and vie over it. He would knock them down. Never, I barely remember that someone gave an answer that he accepted. And he just destroyed the answers, okay? You read on and read on. You thought you knew this thing perfectly, cold, by heart, all the commentaries, super commentaries. You're trying to explain, what you think is a simple piece of paper right here with writing, and he would destroy you. By the time 45 minutes were gone, your brain was like a pretzel. You thought you knew it. Everything was twisted, convoluted, crazed. You would go crazy, and you would go read on, and every step of the way was like another stumbling block. It was like impossible. Then he would close his eyes. Sometimes he would put his head down on his hand, and he would wait there with bated breath. Sometimes 3 minutes, 5 minutes. It always felt like an eternity. He would raise his head and he'd say, gentlemen, I would like to suggest two answers. Two answers. And like a quadratic equation, that has more than one answer, he would say, if you take these two laws and you insert them into the text of the Talmud, these two ideas, these two principles, and he begins to explain, reading and explain, and using these principles generally, the whole page would open up, and like the most beautiful poem, the most dramatic building suddenly would appear, and he would build column upon column, brick upon brick, poetry upon poetry, base upon base, and you were like astounded. You were just astounded. You walk out of there floating, levitating, literally levitating. You would say to yourself, I just saw brilliance in action. I just saw a person teaching in the image of God. Has anyone heard of a man by the name of Friedrich Engels? Friedrich Engels. No? Wasn't he one of the founding fathers of America with Washington, Jefferson? No? No? Yes, yeah. Oh, Harvard. They know. From Harvard, they know. Yeah. Karl Marx's, yes, collaborator in writing the Communist Manifesto. Correct. Okay? So he collaborated in 1848 with Karl Marx, and he wrote the Communist Manifesto. In 1883, he wrote a book called The Dialectic of Nature. Dialectic of Nature. Anybody know what the Hegelian idea of dialectic means? Dialectic? It's basically an idea that everything has a thesis and an antithesis. A thesis and antithesis. To simplify it, we would say that everything has an active stage and a passive stage. Everything has an active stage and a passive stage. What Friedrich Engels points out in this book, The Dialectic of Nature, now listen to this. Deborah, listen to this because it's so amazing an idea, okay? Everything he claims, you hear this, Lucia? Dina, okay? Everything that moves or breathes in nature has a passive and active stage to it. Everything that breathes or moves has a thesis and an antithesis, the dialectic of nature. What does that mean? Listen to this. Because it's so brilliant and so self-evident, so in front of your eyes, okay? The sun rises And then at night it sets. The moon waxes, the moon wanes. A flower blossoms, and a flower dies. Your eyes open, your eyes close. You inhale,
You exhale.
you exhale. You're awake, you're asleep. Everything in nature that moves or breathes has a positive and a negative stage. You see where I'm going with the Shabbat, right?
Yeah, I do.
Okay. So, you're awake, you're asleep. Now, listen to this. We have two very important biological systems in our body. One is called the respiratory, the other is called the circulatory system, okay? What is the respiratory? Respiratory, you inhale, correct? And what are you inhaling?
Air.
Air that includes oxygen, right? Okay? And you're exhaling carbon dioxide. Carbon monoxide, you'd be dead, okay? All right. Carbon dioxide, okay? Now, you inhale the oxygen in order to oxygenate what? The blood, which circulates throughout the system and provides the oxygen to the cellular material, right? So it survives. Meanwhile, it collects what? The carbon dioxide from the cellular materials, and we exhale, correct? Okay? So you inhale, you exhale. Your heart beats, your heart rests, correct? We have that, okay? It's the principle. That's the way it works. So, first of all, it's very self-evident, okay, that everything in nature needs to rest. Everything in nature needs to rest. So, of course, you have to go to sleep at night. So your eyes have to close. So your heart has to rest in between beats, right? You sleep at night. What the rabbis say is that not only do you need your daily rest, your nightly rest, but you need your weekly rest. You need your weekly rest. Why? And here they use a very beautiful metaphor, okay? When we have the circulatory and respiratory system working, what is happening? When we exhale, we're getting rid of the waste and we're taking in the energized air, the oxygen, correct? Well, when you work, you're collecting wastes in your body. Interesting. Now, here's a very controversial idea, okay? And this is, of course, not Friedrich Engels. This is some of the rabbis have proposed this, and you could disagree with me. But if I ask you, what is the primary provocative force that causes a person to be creative? Where does creativity, what motivates a person to be creative, to be inventive? So, what these rabbis suggest is that creativity is very often a result of frustration. What does that mean? Frustration? What does that have to do with creativity? Okay? Let's take Picasso, okay? Picasso created a new art form. Why? Why did he create a new art form? There was Romanticism and there was Impressionism. There was all sorts of stuff. There was classical art. Yeah, why couldn't he just, play ball like all the other guys? Why did he?
Because he got bored with it.
Because it didn't speak to him. He was frustrated. And when he wanted to express, it just didn't express. So what did he do? He starts dabbling around. He comes up with this whole new art form. And it becomes Pablo Picasso, right? Why did they invent the wheel? Why was the wheel invented? Why was the wheel invented? To move things. Why couldn't they just schlep it without a wheel?
Because faster, yes, and also because you don't have too much weight on your back.
Okay, it made things easier. It was frustrating to schlep on the ground, okay? So you put a log underneath and realized you didn't need the whole log. All you needed was a wheel, right? Yeah. And then once they had the wheel, they said, why should I schlep? Let the horse schlep, right? Let the ox schlep, okay? So it was a result of frustration. And then after the ox came the boat, right? Why do we have to schlep on the ground? Let's put the thing in the water and let's, transport it here. Great, okay? But the boat, we have to row. Oh, no, now we can develop sails, right? Next thing you know, an engine, internal combustion machine. We got a car. We got a boat, okay? And each one, jet planes. It's not fast enough. Supersonic jet planes, okay? Eventually, you know what's going to happen? They're going to take us and they're going to decompose us down to our cellular material, and through some sort of thread, they're going to be able to transport us to Tel Aviv Lud Airport, and there they're going to recreate us as human beings. We won't even have to travel. You know that that's true. That's going to happen.
Yeah.
Okay? You don't?
I guess with this.
No, it's impossible? Yeah. Okay, see me in 500 years. Okay.
Hey, Rabbi.
All right, wait. Okay, so what these rabbis suggest is that frustration is the source of creativity. Isn't that fascinating? It's a negative thing that causes creativity. Where does this idea come from? Very fascinating. The Bible says that God says to the Jewish people, Ve'asuli migdash v'shachanti betocham. You shall make for me a mikdash. What's a mikdash? A sanctuary, a temple, tabernacle, and I shall dwell in your midst. He doesn't say I'll dwell in the sanctuary. God doesn't dwell in the sanctuary. It's a way of focusing the people's attention on God. God is all over. God is omnipresent. But it focuses God's presence in the sanctuary, okay? So you want to build a building for God. What do you want to do? Build the most perfect structure that you possibly can, correct? You build the most perfect structure, the most beautiful structure you possibly can. That was the tabernacle temporarily, and then eventually the temple, and then Lincoln Square Synagogue for a mere $55 million, right? That's it, okay. And I don't know if anyone is ever going to outdo this place, okay? So the idea is that every single action and labor that was involved in building the tabernacle, those are called not work. It's not called work. It's called creative labors. Melacha. Creative labors. And there are 39 creative labors that are involved in the building and the operation of the tabernacle. And the categories can be subsumed as weaving and all the things that are related to weaving, planting, tanning, making curtains and things like that, lighting fire, and carrying. Those are the 5 major categories of the 39 prohibited labors. Those are the labors that are prohibited on Shabbos. Creative labors, not work. You know, the physicist has a definition of what work is. Anybody know what the physicist's definition of work is? What is it called? What's the formula? All right? Mass times distance, okay, equals work, okay? Mass times distance. If I take these glasses and I move them, 2 inches, I've done work, okay? So if I move a mass times a distance, I've done work. But what happens if I do isometric exercises? Anybody know what isometric? Okay, I put my hands against the wall. I push it right, I get it. I'm fatigued. I'm about to collapse. According to the physicist, I have not done any work because I've not moved any mass, any distance. So he has a very, very specific definition of what work is. In Judaism, the specific definition of work is those 39 categories of labor that were involved in building the most perfect structure. So what happens? So this is what the rabbis say. Listen to this. It's an amazing thing. When you work and do these 39 creative labors, weaving, tanning, planting, lighting a fire, carrying, milling, slaughtering an animal, whatever it may be, okay? Those 39, okay? Harvesting, plowing, whatever it might be. You are working and creating a waste in your body. It's building up a frustration. Creative labor results in frustration. Not only as a result of frustration, but it also results in frustration. It leaves you filled with the waste products. Just like the circulatory system, right, expels the carbon dioxide, so we need to get rid of the waste products on Shabbos by ceasing from work. No labor, no work. Those 39 categories of labor are forbidden. And it's only those specific labors. So you have every day you have an accumulation of frustrations. You got to get it out. You go to sleep. But every week you got a collective collection of frustration that you got to get out, and that is the Sabbath. And on the Sabbath, what do? We try to return to the most elementary way of life, okay? Almost like to the Garden of Eden. The Garden of Eden. And that's really what's involved in the Sabbath, where we go back to the primordial experience, to experience what it was to be just at leisure with God. Physical creative labor is prohibited, but not mental creative labor is not prohibited on Shabbos, even though it might cause you to be frustrated, okay? So we have in the Songs of the Sabbath, it says, you're allowed to think of matchmaking on Shabbos. Let's see if you can think of a shidduch for somebody. That's not prohibited. And you know that for some people that could be very angst-ridden experience, trying to think of, who can I fix this person up with? Who can I fix my daughter, my son up with, okay? So nevertheless, that's permitted on Shabbos because that's mental and not physical. I know that I could figure out a way without violating the Sabbath to do some of these things. So for instance, I could attach a Shabbos clock, a timer, to my television, and I can watch a video, right? Or listen to this. Listen to this. I can play tennis on Shabbos. I can play tennis on Shabbos without violating the Shabbos. How? One of the problems with playing tennis on Shabbos is that you're not allowed to carry, right? You're not allowed to carry out into the public domain. Okay. So there's a wall around the tennis court, right? And that could become your Eruv. That could become making it into a private domain rather than a public domain, okay? So there's a fence around the tennis court, right? And then the problem with the tennis racket is that it's muktzah. It's not something that's to be used on Shabbos like a hammer, right? You don't use a hammer on Shabbos. You're allowed to use a hammer on Shabbos to break nuts open, okay? If you use it for breaking nuts, okay? But if you're using it to bang nails, you're not allowed to because it's muktzah. It doesn't have a use on Shabbos. But a tennis racket should be muktzah. No. I am going to buy a specially designated tennis racket. In fact, I'm going to buy Spalding because it has the S on it, for Shabbos, right? Okay? So I'm going to buy a Spalding tennis racket. I'm going to designate it L'chvod Shabbos, in honor of Shabbos, and the Shabbos balls. I'm going to have Shabbos balls, right? So I'm going to be inside a enclosure. I'm going to play tennis, and I will not have violated the Sabbath. So you say, okay, it's not within the Sabbath spirit, but what does that mean? It's not within the Sabbath spirit. Can anyone tell me what it's not within the Sabbath spirit to do that? I'll tell you what it means not to be within the Sabbath spirit. It's true. You can attach a Shabbos clock to your video. You can attach a Shabbos clock to your iPad, and you can attach a Shabbos clock to your, or leave it on the whole day, right? Or to your television. And here we are, we're watching Funny Girl with Barbara Streisand. And you're sitting there, and it's so much fun, the singing, the jokes, etc., etc. But what is it? You're using an artificial means to entertain you. Or you're using an artificial means to entertain two people. You're sitting there with your daughter, your son, your wife, your husband, and you're having a great time. But it's an artificial means. It's not you doing anything. You're bringing a third party in to do it for you. Okay? Playing tennis. You're playing tennis. Now, let me tell you. If you were playing tennis with a 4-year-old kid, and we try to play tennis, the kid misses half the balls, okay? Unless he's like a whiz, an unbelievable athlete at that age, okay? So if you're hired to teach that kid to be a coach, you're willing to endure anything. You'll chase after 50 balls. It doesn't matter, Or you'll hire someone to collect the balls, okay? But after a while, you're going to get tired out. Why? Because the child can't hit the ball back so you can have a decent volley. Without a decent volley, there's no fun in it. Unless you're getting, $100 an hour to be paid for that. That's good. That's okay. Okay? So in other words, you're saying, I have no use for you unless you can hit the ball back to me. I have no use for you because Barbara Streisand is entertaining me. And when we just have a conversation, you are as boring as can be, or as uninteresting as can be. On Shabbos, we say no. On Shabbos, we return to that primordial experience, and you say, talk to me, look to me in the eyes, see, There are parents who discovered that their children have green or blue eyes because of Shabbos, because they never look at their children ever. They're running and hugging and this and that. Oh, she has blue eyes. I didn't know she had blue eyes. Oh, look at that streak in her hair. Didn't know. What did you do? You got a new haircut this week? Oh, when do you look at your children? Right? It's unbelievable. You're supposed to kiss and hug your children every day, every night, right? Thank God for Shabbos. You have mandated kissing your children on Shabbos. Do you know that? Friday night, you bless your children. You put your hands on them and you say, may you be as Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, Leah. May you be as Abraham. Ephraim and Manasseh, okay? It's mandated. Halavaya should be mandated every day, every night, all the time. But we don't find the time for it. Because, and this is the principle, you can't have quality time without quantity time. That is the great revolutionary idea. We spoke about revolutionary ideas last week. The great revolutionary idea about Shabbat is that you can't have quality time without quantity time. And that's what Shabbos is about. You have 25 hours of fixed time to spend with your family, to talk. And you know, there's no distractions. What we have today, everything is distracted. Guy goes to the toilet to pee, and he's on his iPhone. It's not crazy. The average family, listen to this. Okay, my yarmulke jumps off my head, okay? Listen, the average family watches 49 hours of television a week. 49 hours. That's before. It used to be now it's the internet, okay? Now it's absolutely the internet that's taking it. But this is what the statistics are. The average family watches 49 hours of television a week, and the average parent speaks to their child no more than 12 minutes a day. 12 minutes a day. And what do you think that conversation is? Did you do your homework? Did you wash behind your ears? Did you clean up your room? Most of it is that type of conversation. It's like insane. We've lost the art of communication. People don't talk today. Today it's even worse because today it's all texting. All texting. People will no longer recognize other people's faces anymore in the next generation. They won't. And they won't talk to one another. They're going to lose some of that communication skills, like we've lost them already, because they don't talk. There's this great story about Rav Shmelki of Neckelsburg. He died in 1778. And he was known as a very, very generous person. And he always liked to help the poor people. And one day a poor person came up to him and asked him for money, and he realized he had no money, so he ran into his house. He couldn't find any spare change lying around. He went to his wife's jewelry drawer, and he took out a brooch, and he brought it out and gave it to the poor person. The poor person was delighted. Meanwhile, his wife comes back and says, my brooch is missing. Do you know how valuable that is? Do you know what you gave that man? So he starts running after him. Mister! The guy hears him running after him. He runs faster right away. He doesn't want to give the brooch back. He says, I don't want the brooch back. I just want to tell you that brooch is very valuable, and when you sell it on the market, make sure that you get the right price for it. That's what Shabbat is. The brooch is very valuable. Get the right price for it. Realize that this ancient idea was never needed more than we need it today. We need to return to our roots. We need to return to our early experiences where we talk to one another face to face, where we sing together, where we learn things together at the Shabbat table, where we have family time. Family time is the most critical element of building society. You know, if I had the power, I would go down to Washington. I would speak to President Obama, and I would say, Mr. Obama, you want to address 85% of the issues that afflict the American society today, crime, drug use. You know what you should do? You should legislate Shabbos. Friday for the Muslims, Saturday for the Jews, Sunday for the Gentiles. That everybody has to have quality time. You have to have sacred time. Sacred time.
He would agree with you because he has
He would agree with me.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
sounds like he has.
They'd run me out of the country because, capitalism doesn't like that, But the point is that we need sacred time. Everybody needs sacred time. We have to be restored to our primordial existence. The Talmud in Sabbath 10b, in the tractate of Sabbath 10b, says as follows. God says, I have a wonderful gift in my treasury, and Shabbat is its name. Go and tell the people about it, okay? We're the emissaries to teach the world how wonderful this gift is. Now, the Bible says something very, very cruel and brutal. The Bible says, Mechalaleha mot yumat. Those who desecrate the Sabbath shall surely die. Remember, in this week's parsha, the guy was gathering wood on the Shabbat, and they stoned him, right? They put him to death, okay? What does that mean for us today? Those who violate the Sabbath shall surely die. I think what it means to us is that those who violate the Sabbath today are missing a very great part of their lives. They're letting themselves wither and die and missing a great, great, great gift. Ahad Ha'am once said, more than the Jews have kept the Sabbath has kept the Jews. We need it, not only for the Jewish people, but we need to teach the world what sacred time is all about. And we need to do it fast. And if we do that, we will save ourselves and the world. And I wish you all, I know it's, Wednesday night? But I wish you all Shabbat Shalom. Okay.